It was supposed to be a marriage contract. Then the millionaire said, "Nothing will be cancelled." Hello everyone. Before we begin, if these stories bring you a little peace, a quiet tear, or a smile that stays until midnight, please take a moment to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It's free and only takes a second of your time, but it helps this little channel grow so we can keep sharing moments that remind us what love is truly about. And tell us where you're watching from your words. Make this world feel a little warmer, a little kinder. Thank you for being here. Some love stories begin with vows. This one begins with a contract. Let us return to our main character. London wakes pale and slow under a veil of fog. Through the glass of the 27th floor, the city blurs steel and silver, melting into mist. Inside a quiet fitting room at the Langford Hotel, a young woman stands still before a mirror that seems too grand for her. Mira Kent, 25, barista by routine, stranger by design. The borrowed wedding dress drapes her like a secret she has not learned to keep. The fabric sighs when she moves, white lace catching the light, tracing the tremor in her fingers. Her reflection stares back, almost unfamiliar. They say a wedding day is the happiest day of a woman's life, her voice murmurs, soft and steady inside her own mind. Today, I just hope no one finds out I am only a bride for hire. The air carries the faint hum of distant flashes reporters waiting outside the ballroom, the city whispering about a billionaire who plans to marry after months of silence. None of them will guess that his bride spent yesterday serving coffee 2 blocks away. The door opens with the hush of authority. A woman in a dark suit enters, her expression rehearsed. She hands Mira a sealed envelope, nodding once. "From Mr. Hale," she says quietly. "You have 48 hours. You cannot leave the ceremony until he says, 'Done.'" Mira hesitates. The envelope feels heavier than it should. Inside, £10,000 in cash, a 3-page non-disclosure agreement, and a brief note typed, "Unsigned." "Keep your head down. Smile. Be convincing." She runs her thumb along the edge of the paper, her pulse counting the seconds. The ink smells like iron. The money smells like relief. Somewhere in the folds of the veil, her heart begins to protest. She looks around the room. A bouquet of white roses rests on the chair, tied with a silk ribbon. The veil, too long, too perfect, hangs from a silver hook. Everything has been prepared for someone else. The door clicks again. This time, footsteps carry the kind of confidence that never has to ask for space. Adrian Hale enters tall, composed, the kind of man whose silence makes others fill in the story for him. Cameras flash beyond the half-closed door, the chaos outside bending around his stillness. He closes it behind him and studies her for one brief, impersonal second. "This is only a formality," he says. His tone is precise, like a contract read aloud. "A public distraction. You just have to smile. And remember, do not tremble." Mira meets his eyes through the sheer veil. The distance between them feels exact, measured, safe. Her breath clouds the thin air. "And if I tremble anyway?" He pauses. For the first time, the ice in his voice softens, almost human. "Then look at me," he says. "I will not let it fall apart." Something flickers in her chest recognition, or warning. She cannot tell. He checks his watch, every gesture deliberate. The ceremony begins in 10 minutes. Someone will come for you. When he leaves, the room exhales with him. Mira sits down, the dress folding like a sigh around her. She lays the bouquet across her lap, tracing the petals with careful fingers. 48 hours, she tells herself. Just keep your head down. Smile. Be convincing. Outside, London keeps breathing its slow, cold rhythm. Down below, bells begin to stir the air, faint but certain. She rises, steadying herself in front of the mirror one last time. The veil catches the morning light, turning her into a ghost of someone loved. Somewhere beyond the door, cameras wait, contracts wait, and a stranger with steel in his voice has promised her one thing: nothing will be cancelled. A week before the wedding, London was still wet with winter. The sky hung low, pressing its weight on the streets, and the city smelled faintly of rain and rust. Mira Kent sat on the edge of her narrow bed, phone glowing in her hands. A new message from the bank blinked across the screen. Final reminder: outstanding balance. Failure to pay will result in property repossession. Her thumb hovered, unable to close it. The apartment was small, barely a room and a kitchen, but it was her mother's. Every corner held a memory: the cracked teapot, the faded curtains, the plant that had somehow survived a year without bloom. It wasn't worth much to anyone else, but to her, it was everything. She pressed the phone to her chest, breathing through the quiet. I can't lose this too, she thought. Not what she left me. At the cafe that evening, the espresso machine hissed its last breath before closing. Lena wiped down the counter beside her, glancing over. You've been staring at that phone for 10 minutes, Lena said softly. Bad news? Mira nodded, a weak smile flickering. They're taking the flat if I don't pay this week. Lena hesitated. I might know something. It's weird, but there's an agency looking for models to try on wedding dresses. 1 session, quick money. My cousin said it's all legit. Models? Mira let out a small laugh. You're joking. Not runway, don't worry. They said they need ordinary elegance. Their words, not mine. Sounds like a scam. Maybe, but scams don't usually pay this well. Just go see. What can it hurt? That night, Mira lay awake, staring at the ceiling cracks that looked like rivers on a map. Her mind counted numbers instead of sheep, rent, debt, the price of groceries. Hope and fear traded places until morning. By noon the next day, she found herself outside a polished glass building near the river. Inside, the air smelled of lilies and expensive perfume. A woman at the desk looked up with a professional smile. Miss Kent? Yes. Thank you for coming. The fitting will be brief. You'll receive compensation immediately after. Confidentiality is required. Oh. She handed Mira a short document, neat, official, sealed with a company logo. The words were clear. Absolute privacy. No personal contact. Temporary bridal role. Mira frowned. A temporary bride? It's just a concept shoot, the woman said easily. 48 hours, minimal work, full payment. Her pulse tripped over itself. 48 hours. Her phone buzzed again in her pocket. Another message from the bank. Payment due by Friday. She tightened her grip on the paper, the sound of her heartbeat filling the sterile room. 3 days, she told herself. Just 3 days. Enough to save her home. Then I'll go back to my real life. She drew in a breath and looked down at the document again, the edges sharp against her fingers. Outside, the city kept moving, unaware that a quiet choice was forming a small, desperate yes that would change everything. London's skyline spread out in cold geometry glass, steel, and the faint hum of rain against the city's tallest windows. Mira stood at the edge of a room that did not belong to her. The penthouse of Adrian Hale felt less like a home and more like an equation, everything calculated, nothing accidental. Floor-to-ceiling glass framed the city. Leather chairs lined up like chess pieces, and the air smelled faintly of paper and ink. He stood by the window, sleeves rolled, reading through a document in silence. The rain painted thin lines across the glass behind him, softening the edges of his reflection. You read fast, he said without turning. Good. Let's go over the terms. Mira nodded, holding the pages as though they might burn. He spoke evenly, like someone used to being obeyed. We live under the same roof, separate rooms. His gaze flicked toward her. We appear together in 3 public events. You will remain professional at all times. She waited. The city hummed. No tears in front of the press, he continued. Not even for show. And you do not ask about my former fiancé. The words landed like cold stones on the table between them. Mira lowered her eyes. Understood. He signed his name at the bottom of the page, his handwriting sharp and decisive. Then he passed the pen across to her. Your turn. Oh. Her fingers trembled just enough for the pen to slip, once before she caught it again. The metal was warm from his hand. She pressed it to the page. The sound of the nib-scratching paper was the only noise in the room. Her nails, chipped from weeks of cafe shifts, glinted faintly against the white paper as she wrote Mira Kent. She laid the pen down. He glanced at her signature, then at her. This is business, Miss Kent. Nothing more. No confusion, no sentiment. She met his eyes. The distance between them felt precise, drawn by rules he had rehearsed long before she arrived. I understand, she said softly. I once served coffee to a man proposing over the phone. He didn't even look up from his laptop. Something flickered across Adrian's face quick, almost imperceptible. She continued, her voice steady now. Sometimes feelings are just another form of business. For a heartbeat, silence held the room. Then he nodded, expression unreadable. That will make things easier. He closed the folder, aligning the edges with quiet precision, and set it aside. You'll stay here starting tonight, he said. Your room is at the end of the hall. Someone will bring your schedule for the week. Our first public event is tomorrow evening. Black dress, minimal jewelry. Yes, Mr. Hale. He turned back toward the window, looking out at the gray sprawl below. London doesn't forgive mistakes, especially in my world. Follow the rules, and you'll leave with what you came for. What if I don't know what I came for? He looked over his shoulder. Then figure it out before someone else does. Her throat tightened, but she nodded. I will. She gathered the signed pages, slid them into the folder, and stood. The sound of her heels on the marble floor echoed like the ticking of a clock measured. Careful, not yet belonging. Behind her, Adrian's reflection stayed still in the glass. A man built out of calm and distance. She wondered if he had always been this cold, or if someone had frozen him on purpose. The door closed softly behind her, leaving the penthouse in the low hush of rain. In the quiet hallway, she looked down at her hands. The faint smudge of ink on her fingers felt heavier than the contract itself. 48 hours, she reminded herself. 3 events, no tears, no questions. But as she walked toward her room, she could still feel his eyes somewhere behind her, sharp and unreadable like the city itself, daring her to break one rule. Morning unfolded quietly over London, pale light spilling through the glass walls of the penthouse. The air smelled faintly of polish and lilies. Mira Kent sat at the long dining table, posture straight, hands clasped. Across from her, Mrs. Wren, the housekeeper, moved like an old metronome, steady, patient, precise. Begin again, Mrs. Wren said. Knife in the right, fork in the left. The smaller spoon is for dessert. Smile only when spoken to. Speak only when you mean it. Mira tried. Her hand trembled slightly as she lifted the cutlery. A glass tilted, a napkin slipped. Stop apologizing, the older woman said gently. Grace is not the absence of mistakes, it is how you recover from them. Mira smiled faintly. I was never taught any of this. Then you learn now. Mr. Hale values composure. From the far end of the room, Adrian Hale appeared unexpectedly, jacket draped over his arm, phone in hand. He paused by the doorway, unseen at first. Mira, unaware, tried again to cut a slice of fruit, fumbling. The fork slipped. She caught it with both hands, laughing quietly at herself. It was small, human, imperfect. Adrian's eyes lingered. Something in that laugh unsettled him, a warmth out of place in the room's polished silence. For a moment, he forgot the call still running in his ear. The sound of her laughter, soft, unguarded, belonged to a world far simpler than his. No performance, no calculation. Just the kind of ordinary life he had not touched in years. He turned away before she noticed. Continue, he said curtly, sliding the phone into his pocket. Mrs. Wren bowed slightly. Yes, sir. When he was gone, Mira exhaled, unaware she had been observed. Is he always that serious? Serious, Mrs. Wren said, is what's left when people stop believing in joy. That evening, the city opened like a stage. A charity gala, cameras waiting, glasses clinking under chandeliers. Mira descended the spiral staircase of the penthouse, the sound of her heels echoing down the marble. The gown she wore shimmered softly, like captured moonlight. At the bottom, Adrian waited in a black tuxedo, expression unreadable. She hesitated under the weight of flashbulbs beyond the glass doors. Ready? He asked, his voice steady but low. I think so. He offered his arm. Then stay close. Inside the gala, conversation sparkled like glass. She followed the steps she had practiced, smile, nod, breathe. Yet the world here was faster, colder. She reached for what she thought was water, sipped and coughed as the champagne fizzed sharp against her tongue. Across the table, Adrian's eyes caught hers. There was no mockery in them, only quiet surprise. And maybe, for a fraction of a second, amusement. She looked away, heat rising to her cheeks. He said nothing. But later, as she stumbled on another etiquette cue, his voice brushed near her ear. Low, and calm. Slow down. You do not have to mimic them. Just stand still. That's enough. The words steadied her more than she wanted to admit. Hours passed. The ballroom swirled with gowns and applause. When the music softened, she slipped out to the terrace, heels pinching her feet. The night air tasted clean. She crouched, unbuckled the shoes, and left them by the door. The marble under her bare feet was cold and honest. Adrian appeared moments later, jacket loosened, tie undone. "Where are your shoes?" "They were biting," she said, smiling. He glanced down, then up again. "Then go barefoot. No one here would dare." Her laughter came quietly. "Maybe that's why it feels right." He looked at her, the city lights reflected in his eyes. In that instant, she seemed untouched by the world that had hardened him simple, alive, real. "Enjoy the air," he said, stepping back toward the doorway, voice softer now. "Just don't vanish." "I'll stay," she murmured. He left, but his expression lingered, something almost like longing, buried beneath restraint. The shoes remained by the door, abandoned under the spill of golden light. They would stay there until morning, silent proof that for one brief night she had walked free. And somewhere inside that freedom, Adrian Hale had remembered what it looked like to be human. The bells of St. Mary's began to toll, slow and deliberate, their sound threading through the London fog. Outside, the air shimmered with flashes. Dozens of cameras waited like a restless sea, the noise of voices pulsing against the ancient stone. Inside the church, time moved differently. The light through stained glass fractured into quiet color: rose, gold, ivory sliding across Mira Kent's dress, as if even the day itself hesitated to touch her. She stood at the threshold, her breath shallow behind the veil. The lace trembled with every exhale. The bouquet in her hands felt too heavy, the petals too perfect to be real. She told herself, it's just another role. 3 days. Walk down the aisle, sign the papers, and walk out whole again. But her heart betrayed her. It beat too loud, too certain, as though it recognized something her mind refused to name. Across the nave, Adrian Hale waited by the altar. His posture was as composed as ever, hands clasped, eyes steady, a statue carved from restraint. Yet when the doors opened and she stepped inside, a flicker passed through his expression. Barely there, but enough to break the stillness around him. The organ began its slow procession. Mira walked forward, the sound of her heels mingling with the music. Each step felt like a question. Her veil brushed against her shoulders. The air carried the faint scent of lilies and candle wax. When she reached him, he turned slightly, just enough to meet her eyes. The noise of the world dimmed. The priest's voice rose, warm and rehearsed. "Dearly beloved, we gather here today." The ceremony blurred into rhythm, words spoken for the audience, vows borrowed from 1,000 other weddings. Mira barely heard them. All she could feel was the tremor under her skin, the slow awareness that her hand rested inches from his. "I don't know why my heart is beating like this," she thought. "Everything here is make-believe." Then came the moment. "Do you take this man?" She froze. Her throat closed. The question hung between them, heavier than it should have been. Adrian leaned closer, his voice cutting through the silence, low, calm, certain. "Just breathe," he murmured. "Nothing will be canceled." The words brushed against her like warmth in winter. She blinked, caught between disbelief and relief, and drew in a shaky breath. "All right," she whispered back. The priest smiled, mistaking the pause for emotion. Then, by the power vested in me, the final phrase came like the closing of a door. "You may kiss the bride." 1,000 lenses clicked in anticipation. Adrian moved first. His hand found the curve of her waist, guiding her gently toward him. The gesture was practiced, professional, but his touch was not cold. It lingered, firm enough to steady her, soft enough to undo her resolve. She lifted her face. The veil brushed his shoulder. For a heartbeat, they simply looked at each other, the world, a blur of light and breath. Then he bent closer. The kiss began as a whisper, barely there, careful, meant only for show. But something in it shifted. Her fingers trembled against his arm, and his hand tightened almost imperceptibly at her back. The distance that the contract demanded fell away like air leaving a room. The scent of lilies, the weight of light, the warmth of him, everything sharpened. Her heart stuttered, caught between fear and recognition. He didn't pull away. For a suspended second, Neither of them remembered the flashes, the deal, the waiting world. It was supposed to be a performance. But the tremor in his breath, the slight break in her composure, betrayed them both. When he finally let go, it was too slow to look rehearsed. The applause erupted, distant, unreal. She heard her own name, her own image being called out, but it all came from somewhere far away. Adrian looked down at her once more, voice quiet enough for her alone. "You did well," he said. She tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come. The cameras burst again, hungry, insistent. Somewhere beyond the crowd, a journalist whispered to another, "Did you see that? That kiss looked real." Within hours, the photo would circle the city, a headline stamped across every screen, "The kiss that didn't look fake." And though Mira smiled for the lenses, her pulse betrayed her secret. Because under the cathedral light, in that impossible stillness, it hadn't been fake at all. The night settled over London like silk pulled tight across glass. The city below was still awake, lights flickering along the Thames, car horns drifting through the mist, but inside the penthouse, silence pressed close. Mira stood before the tall mirror, the veil still pinned in her hair. The reflection startled her, a stranger in lace, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, lips touched with a color that wasn't hers. Slowly, she lifted her hands and unpinned the veil. It slipped free, falling soundlessly onto the carpet. She studied her face again. "Do I look like someone else to you?" Behind her, Adrian Hale stood near the window. The reflection caught half of him, the line of his jaw, the loosened tie, the faint glow of the city brushing his profile. He didn't answer at first. Then softly, "You look like someone who once said no to me." Her brow furrowed. "And what happened to her?" His gaze dropped to the city lights. "She isn't here anymore." Silence unfolded between them, fragile as glass. The clock on the wall ticked once, then again. Mira turned toward him. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. She didn't know what for the words simply fit the air. He shrugged out of his jacket, the movement slow, deliberate. The fabric whispered as he held it out to her. "The cold here isn't fake," he said. She hesitated, then took it. The jacket was warm from his body, the scent of cedar and rain lingering in the folds. She pulled it around her shoulders, the sleeves falling past her wrists. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the city slipped through the open balcony door, and she found herself drawn to it. Mira stepped outside, the air biting softly against her skin. The river stretched below, endless and dark, carrying the glow of passing boats. Adrian followed, stopping just behind her. "You did well today," he said. "It didn't feel like me," she replied. "Maybe that's the point." She turned to face him. They stood close now, closer than they should have. The distance between them felt fragile, alive. The wind tugged at her hair. His hand lifted halfway as if to fix it, then stopped midair. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Why does it feel real, even when we both know it's not?" His eyes met hers, steady and quiet. "Because you believed it. For a moment, so did I." The air between them tightened. A heartbeat passed, one, then two. He leaned in slightly, the warmth of his breath brushing her cheek. The space left for choice grew thinner with every second. She didn't move. Then, as if reminded of the rules he'd written himself, he stepped back. "Good night, Mira." "Okay." Her name lingered on his tongue, softer than before. When he left the balcony, the scent of his jacket stayed with her, rich and human. She drew it closer around her shoulders and looked out at the river. The city lights rippled over the water, and somewhere deep in the noise, her heart found a rhythm that felt dangerously like hope. Morning came softer than it should have. London was pale and hushed, the river below still wrapped in mist. The night before felt like something fragile left between them on the balcony, unspoken, yet undeniably real. Mira woke early. For once, the penthouse no longer felt like a stranger's place. She tied her hair loosely, padded barefoot across the marble, and made coffee. The scent filled the air, warm, ordinary, human. She found eggs in the fridge, toasted bread, set 2 plates without thinking. It felt natural, almost peaceful, to move through the quiet. When Adrian came down the stairs, the look on his face softened for the first time since she had met him. He was used to mornings, beginning with silence and business calls, not the sound of someone humming under her breath. He sat across from her. "You made this?" she smiled. "Unless you have another woman hiding in your kitchen." He almost laughed. "No, I don't." They ate without pretense, coffee, toast, small talk. The world outside could have been anyone's, but this moment felt like it belonged to them. He thought of how strange it was that a woman who had walked into his life 2 days ago could make his home feel inhabited again. "I'll miss this," she said quietly, eyes on her cup. "The stillness here." "It won't be so still without you," he replied before he could stop himself. For a moment, neither spoke. The clock ticked softly. It was the third day, the end of their 48-hour contract, but it did not feel like an ending. Then Mira's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced down, expecting nothing. But the words on the screen froze her. Headlines: Mira Kent, fake bride. Former cafe worker. New degree. Her breath caught. One by one, other notifications followed. Photos from the wedding. Her name torn apart in comment sections. Her fingers went cold. Adrian reached for his phone, reading the same news, his jaw tightening. "Don't look at it," he said firmly. "It will pass." She stared at him. "Pass? They're calling me a fraud." "They don't matter," he said, tone steady, distant. "You knew this could happen." She wanted to believe him, but something in his calmness broke her heart a little. After breakfast, he left for the office. "Stay here," he told her. "Ignore them." All day, she waited. She told herself he would release a statement, anything to quiet the storm. But the hours passed, and nothing came. By evening, the sunlight had turned the river gold, then gray. The screens still screamed her name. Every cruel word felt heavier. When he returned, she stood by the window, eyes red. "You said not to look." "I didn't, but the world still did." He set down his coat. "You know the rules, Mira." She let out a bitter laugh. "The rules, of course. Silence, composure, no emotion." He looked at her unmoved. "It's better this way." "Better?" Her voice cracked. "I thought you'd at least pretend to defend me, pretend to care. Isn't that in the contract too?" He didn't answer. Her tears burned hot, but her voice steadied. "You told me not to tremble." "I didn't, but maybe you should have warned me that indifference hurts more." She turned away, walked to the table where her keys lay. She placed them beside the wilted bouquet from the first day. "Here, the contract's over anyway." "Mira," he began, but she shook her head. "Don't," she whispered. "You already said everything." Outside, the rain had returned soft at first, then relentless. She stepped into it without hesitation. Each step down the marble path echoed like the closing of a chapter. Asterisk. "It's just the end of a contract." Asterisk, she told herself. Asterisk. That's all it ever was. Asterisk. But as she disappeared into the rain, she knew the ache inside her had nothing to do with business, only with what should never have felt real, yet somehow did. The city kept its distance after she left. The rain lingered for a day, then stopped, leaving the glass walls of the penthouse streaked and cold. Adrian Hale moved through the rooms in silence, his steps echoing where her laughter used to drift. The coffee cups on the counter were gone. The faint scent of her shampoo had vanished. Yet somehow, every corner still carried her. He had faced hundreds of contracts, mergers, acquisitions, dissolutions. Each ended on paper, clean and logical. But this one, the smallest and most personal, refused to end inside him. It was supposed to be perfect, the arrangement concluded, the scandal avoided, the world convinced. By every measure, success. Yet the ease of it hurt. The silence of victory was emptier than defeat. He caught himself listening for the sound of her footsteps in the hallway, the rustle of her voice when she spoke his name. There was none. Only the tick of the clock and the wind pressing against the glass. On the third morning, he rose before dawn. He looked out at the river, the city washed in silver light, and realized that for the first time, he had no plan for what came next. By noon, reporters had gathered inside the company's press room. The seats were full, the air taut with anticipation. When Adrian stepped up to the podium, the flash of cameras painted his face in white light. He spoke without a script. "The past week has been full of speculation," he began. "You want to know the truth." He paused, steady but not distant this time. "The wedding was real," he said, "but the bride was not." The crowd stirred, questions whispered, pens scratching. "She was a stand-in," he continued. A replacement for someone I lost long ago. The event was arranged to quiet a scandal that never should have existed. He looked down at his hands for a moment, then lifted his gaze. But what began as deception became something else. The wedding was not fake. It was love that was fake until it wasn't. A hush swept the room. His voice softened, the edge of formality melting into something unguarded. Her name is Mira Kent, he said. And she reminded me what it means to be alive without a contract, what it means to care without calculation. He reached into the folder beside him and unfolded a single page. This is the appendix to the contract. Clause number 3. No emotional attachment. He set it on the table. That clause is now void. A murmur rippled through the room. Someone asked, "Do you regret it?" He smiled faintly, almost to himself. "I regret that I wrote the rule at all." He took a breath. The compensation Mira was promised, every pound will be donated to a scholarship fund in her mother's name. It's the least I can do for the woman who taught me that perfection is overrated, and honesty, he stopped, voice tightening. Honesty still matters. For the first time, the man who built empires looked small before the crowd. That's all, he finished. Thank you. The flashes returned, blinding, relentless. He blinked against them, but did not hide. It was the first time he had stood in front of the world without armor. Across the city, in a small rented room overlooking the same river, Mira watched the press conference on a flickering television. She sat cross-legged on the bed, wearing a sweater too large for her. The hum of the broadcast filled the quiet. When she heard his voice, something in her chest tightened. He spoke her name clearly, no disguise, no hesitation. The world had finally heard it. Her eyes dropped to the vest folded beside her on the blanket, the one he had given her that night when the city wind turned sharp. She reached for it, fingers tracing the stitching near the collar. On the screen, he lifted the contract appendix. The camera zoomed in on the words. Clause 3. No emotional attachment. The ink beneath was crossed out, replaced by a single line, null and void. Mira's lips trembled into a quiet smile. He broke every rule we wrote, she whispered. The screen faded to the image of the city skyline, rain beginning again beyond the glass. She turned down the volume and sat in the stillness, holding the vest against her chest. The scent of cedar and rain was faint but real. For the first time since she'd walked away, the silence around her didn't feel like loss. It felt like something waiting. The city had quieted after the storm. London's skyline glimmered like glass dusted in gold, the chaos of headlines finally fading into memory. The night air over the Thames carried a calm Mira hadn't felt in weeks. She walked toward South Bank, her steps slow, the sound of the river meeting her like an old secret. That was where they had stood for the wedding photographs, the lights, the laughter, the illusion. Only this time, there were no cameras. Adrian was already there. No security, no black vest. Just him in a simple coat, his hands in his pockets, watching the rippling water. When he turned, the city's glow caught in his eyes, softening the sharpness she remembered. Mira, he said. Her name felt different now, lighter, honest. She stopped a few feet away. You remembered this place. Oh, how could I forget? He smiled faintly. We signed a contract for 48 hours. It's been 48 days. The words fell between them like something both counted but neither had dared to say aloud. Mira's breath misted in the cold. So, she asked gently, what happens now? He reached into his pocket and drew out a small velvet box. The wind tugged at his coat as he opened it. Inside, a ring gleamed under the streetlight, no diamonds, just a slender band of gold, quiet and sure. Now, he said, voice low, steady, nothing will be cancelled. Not us. Her heart stilled. For a moment, neither spoke. The sound of the river filled the silence, carrying pieces of the city away. She took the ring, eyes glistening. You know this isn't part of any contract. That's the point, he said. A smile rose through her tears, small but certain. Then I suppose we should make it real this time. He nodded, and the distance between them disappeared. His hands found hers cold fingers, warm pulse, and the world seemed to pause. The streetlights shimmered across the water, painting them in moving gold. Mira leaned into him, her voice a whisper against his chest. You're late. I was rewriting the ending, he murmured. They stood there, wrapped in the hum of the city, the river gliding quietly beneath their feet. Somewhere in the air, the faint memory of lilies and camera flashes drifted through like a ghost of their beginning. The veil, the vest, the white bouquet, each symbol once borrowed, now belonged to a story no longer staged. As she looked up at him, her voice softened into something like a promise. "Some weddings are made to hide the truth," she said. "But sometimes, the lie reveals the most real thing of all." And under the quiet lights of South Bank, they kissed not for the world, not for the flash of any lens, but for themselves. Because this time, nothing would be canceled. For anyone who still believes in second chances, this story is for you. Thank you for watching.